is what we have been discussing for the last 5 months of the year. So today we are discussing the pain point 4. They are not in any order, but today we are discussing one of the pain points. So if you are not with us from the beginning, let me try and probably just share on what those pain points are. So from taking leaders through our leadership development process for the past couple of years, there are certain problems or challenges that have been presenting across, different, female leaders. And these include a lack of strategic influence. And so due to the fact that as women leaders, we experience a lot of performance pressure, we then end up being too operational and not having an opportunity to make strategic decisions or for strategic consulting or just really to be strategic in our work. We then are mostly operational for most female leaders, and this becomes a pain point. And then we also have, from the fact that you have performance pressure and you're now operational, your hands are on everything in your team or maybe in your department, we've noticed almost like emotional exhaustion and burnout being the second pain point. So you then see a lot of women, yes, they are working hard, yes, they're being operational, but they're now experiencing emotional exhaustion from the raw overload, because you're trying to get your hands onto, there's so many things that are happening in your department or in your role. And you also say yes to a lot of things in your own sort of role. You're not protecting your high payoff points. You're taking even the low payoff, activities in your role. So the raw overload and emotional exhaustion experienced by women leaders. And the third pain point we've also noticed that women experience what we call a leadership identity conflict. You may have had some people say, I'm suffering from imposter syndrome, or I experience imposter syndrome. And what that really is, it's just the fact that you're already there, you're already doing the work, but you're not owning the value of the work that you're bringing. You're not owning it and communicating it. Why? Because from our social conditioning, what is the role of a woman, or how is a woman supposed to show up? As a woman, you're supposed to be humble, so you cannot then just be hooting your own horn, what might be regarded as hooting your own horn, because you're speaking about the value you're bringing, you're communicating your value. So often when you find someone that is experiencing or saying they're experiencing imposter syndrome, is that they are not owning the value that they're bringing. So they are there waiting for someone to come and validate that value for them so that they can feel good. Because remember, social conditioning says a woman doesn't have to speak too much. A woman needs to be humble. So that starts to create almost like an identity conflict between what is a woman supposed to be based on what we've been trained versus what is required for you to succeed in your role in your organization or to be seen as an effective leader in the organization. So we start to see and notice this leadership identity conflict that then creates leadership sort of strain, right? It also creates leadership identity strain. With that also comes the issue of you are now compartmentalizing your roles as a woman at home and your role as a female leader in the organization, right? So you are now, what is expected of me in the work environment? What is expected for me at home? So you now carry the guilty because of the performance pressure, working long hours, always on. You probably start to neglect some of the aspects of what is required or what is seen as expected for you in the home environment. A lot of female leaders carry this guilty of, I'm not giving my children enough time. I'm not giving my loved ones enough time. So you start to experience this tension constantly, right? So that is pain point number 3 that I was explaining on raw overload or on identity conflict. The fourth one is what we're discussing today. So with all that happening in the background, as a female leader, you are leading a team. If you are leading a team, you're dealing with those things in the background around your emotional exhaustion and raw overload, the lack of strategic influence, and the leadership identity strain, and you're still leading a team. A lot of the time, you then find yourself not having enough capacity to care, coach, and energize, because you're also battling with your own energy levels from the strain that I've just explained, right? So you then find sometimes a challenge where the team is misaligned or the team is underperforming because you don't have the capacity to be able to really get to know the team and know what potential they have and start coaching. A lot of the female leaders that we take through our process will tell you that I coach. But when you start actually having a conversation, you start to see that they actually control rather than coach. They instruct rather than coach, right? And coaching is a different, conversation. It's more connection. You also can't coach a person that you've not connected with. So with a lack of capacity, a lot of the times, again, also identity, conflict. What is professional? What is personal? So a lot of female leaders sometimes will mention to say, how do I connect with the person? How do I separate the personal and the professional? So it becomes kind of a challenge and constantly, constantly a strain that they have to deal with. And the fifth one that we'll have to talk about, in December on the 12th is because of all these things, a lack of clear leadership vision. So we'll talk about a lack of clear leadership vision. But today, let's get straight into the team misalignment or performance. But based on just this introduction, yes, I know some of you have seen me, Dr. Mavis Majura, adult development and leadership psychologist, passionate about cultivating emotional renewal, identity alignment, and sustainable performance for female leaders. That is what I do, and that is what I'm passionate about. But based on the introduction I've shared on the 5 pain points in the chart, I would appreciate which of these 5 pain points have you experienced, if you've experienced them at all. The 5 pain points that I've mentioned, which of these have you experienced in the chart? Please, just drop a chart there. Which of these pain points? Lack of strategic influence, raw overload and emotional exhaustion, identity, leadership identity conflict is the third one. And the fourth one is team misalignment and team misalignment or underperformance. And the fifth one that we'll discuss is the lack of clear leadership vision. Which of these, as a female leader, have you experienced? You can drop in the chat. You can drop in the chat while we are getting started with our, I'm going to share my slides for today's session. So drop in the chat, which of these 5 pain points as a female leader have you experienced? Which of these 5 pain points, using the chat box, what have you experienced? Okay, team misalignment and underperformance. Thanks, Tegan. Okay, both or all of them, the 5. Thanks, Zizwe, Portia. Okay, all right. Which of these? Overload and emotional exhaustion. Atai, thank you for sharing. Number 05. Okay, all right. So I'm speaking to the right people. I'm not a leader, but committee's click, although I must say I've experienced all of these. That's also interesting. So the different levels of leadership, Nancy, are important. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, all right. So let me quickly share my performance, my slides today for the team misalignment conversation that we're having today. Okay, so you give me a moment. I'm going to just share my presentation. Okay, sharing. All right, you let me know if you can see my presentation. Please let me know that you can see my presentation. Okay. All right, so we are talking about team misalignment, and I think you can see where exactly it fits in as a result of some of the challenges, systemic or socially curated challenges that we face as women leaders, but we still have to navigate them. Whether they are socially curated or systemically curated, we still have to navigate them. So how do you transform a team from underperformance by evolving your own leadership identity? How do you transform a team by evolving your own leadership identity? So when you look at it, right, a lot of the times when I take leadership, female leaders through a process, I remember one female leader, when she came, she was like, my team doesn't, communicate, they operate in silos. My team is mostly reactive. And for her, it was the team that was having issues. It was not, her. And here it's not about self-blame, but it's about when you're a leader, your role is to make sure that you influence. Your role is to make sure that you unleash the potential of your team to get it to the next level, right? You unleash the potential of your team to get it to the next level. So when we're looking at team underperformance, some of the root causes of underperformance stem from leadership identity thresholds, right? What does it say? John Maxwell would say the leader is the cap, right? You are the cap, you are the one that determines the level of potential that your team can operate at. But you cannot take your team to the next level of their potential without taking yourself to the next level of your potential. So, which is interesting, right? So a leadership threshold, when your team is performing at a particular level, it just means the leadership that got you to where you are cannot take you to the next level, right? I like also what Marshall Golden says, what got you here will not get you there, right? So your leadership that got you to this level needs to be recalibrated to get to the next level, okay? So leadership identity threshold rather than a shortage of team skills or ability, right? Okay, so you have reached your threshold. You are the cap that's determining how far your team can go, okay? So the leadership energy that you have then obviously determine the team's energy levels. Okay, so we often find that when you're experiencing your own energy crisis, and we've seen it already, it becomes difficult as a leader. We said one of the roles of a leader is to care, it is to coach, it is to energize the team. But if you are depleted as a leader, how do you energize the team? If you are struggling with your own self-care, how do you even then care for your own team, all right? How do you even care for your own team? So you start to experience that, to notice that teams frequently mirror the leader's energy, clarity, and boundaries. Your team mirrors your energy, your clarity, and your boundaries, right? So what does that mean? If it means that we need then to evolve our leadership identity. So there is parts of our own identity that is malleable, that is changeable, right? Parts of our identity that is changeable, that we need to change so that we can get to the next level, okay? So when we address these malleable parts of our identity, we are then able to recalibrate our own performance, recalibrate our own leadership, so that naturally the team also is able to be recalibrated and their performance improves, okay? So what shows team misalignment? How do you know I'm experiencing team misalignment? Recurring firefighting. So as a leader, you're constantly having to deal with agent issues that are coming from the team, okay? And, causing ongoing stress and chaos. A lack of accountability. Team members are not taking, accountability. Team members depend on the leader for direction. They want to come to you and ask for every little thing, right? So they will not be proactive. They will not take action. They're coming to you to ask you for every small decision that needs to be made. And then leadership over involvement. So if you are struggling to delegate due to maybe a lack of trust or just a guilty, okay, so you're over involved. Remember what you said, high payoff, low payoff. You're over involved. You're overly operational, right? Okay, you're picking up the bait for those that are not actually showing up. So you're doing this. What then happens? You then train your team that you are the doer, you're the operator. So they also just really, you start to almost get disengaged and lose, team morale. Okay. And then, so I think all this, as I mentioned, is an indication of the fact that as a leader, you've reached a new threshold, right? Where old narratives, right? Things you say about yourself, the things you say about your team are now presenting as a stopgap. It is now a cap. It is now a barrier for you to get to the next level, right? And then your habits. So picking up after the people who are not doing it, not delegating, if that is the case. And then also the emotions. How do you feel? Frustration as a result of the fact that people are not showing up, people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then also you start to see yourself, obviously, as the person who's doing, but also then because you're not owning the real value of what you bring as a leader, you also start to experience, remember what we said, the imposter syndrome. Like confidence in your own abilities at the level at which you're supposed to be playing, because you're constantly kind of going up and down, right? You're here, but you're constantly going up and down to try and pick up the slack that is being dropped at the bottom, right? So that also starts to become an issue where you start to almost doubt your own abilities and your own capabilities, but also doubt the level at which you're supposed to be operating at. And then the care control trap that women experience. So sometimes as women, because we're carers, naturally, biologically, because of the way we are wired, we start to think that to show that we care, it means that we need to get to everything. We need to control everything, right? So we try and, we start taking over, other people's responsibilities. And this causes emotional fatigue. Okay. And then how do you as a leader then start to, when you transform your own identity, how do you make sure that you facilitate team ownership? Okay. And team ownership cannot be facilitated without a change in yourself as a leader. Okay. So sustainable change occurs when the leader shifts from problem solving to empowering the team, and so that the team can start to take ownership and collaborate. Okay. But how does this occur? So the transformation to change the threshold that I spoke about, the leadership threshold that is now almost showing the results that we're seeing in the team, happens when we go through a transformation process that allow us as leaders to be a total person and a total leader. A total person and a total leader. What is a total person all about? We've got key dimensions of life. There's 6 key areas of our life that we all need to be taking care of on a day-to-day basis, that we need clear goals that we're pursuing, right? That we need results so that we can experience the balance, we can experience the personal wholeness. And when you have the personal wholeness, you can then operate at the 4 levels of leadership, right? So if you look at the key dimensions of life, it will be your social and cultural, it will be your spiritual and ethical, it will be your family and home, it will be your financial and career, it will be your physical and health, it will be your mental and educational. 6 key areas of your life that you need clear goals that you're pursuing for you to experience what we call balance, or for you to experience what we call integration, for you to experience what we call personal wholeness. And when you experience personal wholeness, you're then able to play the 4 levels of leadership. 4 levels of leadership, the first level is the personal productivity, right? When you are experiencing wholeness, it's easy for you to manage your time, to manage your energy. You already have the energy from the wholeness, right? And you also, it becomes very easy for you to, manage what your priorities or decide what your priorities are. So personal productivity, first level of leadership. So if you're battling with energy, battling to identify what your priorities are, battling to manage your time. So the first level of leadership is already cracked. It's already cracked, right? And the next layer of leadership is personal leadership. So personal leadership means I'm able to really lead a balanced life, okay? I'm able to lead a balanced life, okay? And you can see the interdependence between the personal productivity and the balanced life, okay? Personal leadership, I do have a clear vision of where I want my life to be, where I want the key dimensions of my life to be, okay? I'm clear about that. So I'm able to maintain that clarity. And then the next level is the motivational leadership, the ability to influence others, right? And then the next is the strategic leadership, the ability to use vision and structure to take the organization to the next level. The ability to use vision and structure to take the organization to the next level, okay? So what happens? A lot of the times we neglect the key dimensions of our lives to create the wholeness so that we can be able to operate at the 4 levels of leadership, okay? And so this becomes a challenge in terms of recalibrating your leadership. So you want to be able to have holistic alignment and all the personal elements or the key dimensions of your life so that you can multiply sustainable leadership. You can multiply sustainable leadership both for yourself and other team members that you are leading. Okay. So how do you identify? How do you make the shift? How do you make the identity shift? Okay, how do you make the identity shift? Okay, so the first is the awareness. So having an identity threshold is not a failure. It's all of us go through identity thresholds. In fact, it's just an indication. It's almost like when you're growing and then you realize my size 4 shoe no longer fits. You can't blame your feet for growing, right? You can't blame your feet for growing. It's natural. It's the natural rhythm of life, right? So if you are feeling strain, it means you need to grow. It's time to actually grow, right? Where you are and what you're experiencing right now is an indication that there's now need for you to grow. There's now need for you to expand so that you can have capacity to hold whatever responsibilities you have without cracking, without strain, if that makes sense. Okay, so the first level is awareness and acceptance. You're not blaming, you're just accepting, I've reached a threshold, okay? You are not blaming yourself. And then emotional repatterning. How do you change the emotional responses? Because obviously when you reach a threshold, the frustration, the blame, these are natural tendencies, the complaining, and none of that is actually going to help you to do a shift, okay? So how do you then engage in emotional repatterning and then belief reframing? Okay, so what are you believing about yourself? What are you believing? So when you believe I'm not good enough, that's, you need to reframe, right? You got this far because you're good, right? You might need to build other skill sets. You might need to own the value of what you bring to the organization for you to feel that you are, valuable, but also to feel confident in the contribution that you make to the organization. And then you also need behavioral experimentation. Yeah. So when we get to a leadership threshold, our habits, as I mentioned, the emotions, the self-concept, and the narratives need to change. Okay. So how do we change habits? We change habits through behavioral experimentation. So you start to apply new behaviors weekly, right? New behaviors weekly, like delegating, like coaching instead of fixing. Yeah. And that initiates an identity change. So your natural tendencies, your habits that you currently have, needs to kind of change and identify new habits that are going to get your leadership to the next level. And then reflective integration. So you track your emotional and team responses. So often when we're going through our leadership development process, when leaders are on session 3 or session 4, they come back and report, my team says something has shifted in me. Something is changing in me. And I'm like, yes, something is changing, right? Because we're doing the work of making sure that we do an identity shift, right? They were helping them through an identity shift. And when that occurs, even the team starts to experience the space, even the team starts to notice the behavior change. And also that starts to affect, the way the team responds to your leadership. Okay. And then alignment and renewal. So regularly revisiting your values, your well-being, and your boundaries. So obviously, yes, doing the work. When we're doing the work, when there's pressure, it's the end of year, it's normal. You are the instrument of leadership, right? So think about it as an axe. You're using an axe to cut down trees. If you keep on cutting down the trees, obviously it will get blunt at some point. So there's need for resharpening, right? There is need for resharpening. And the question becomes, what are you doing to sharpen the saw? What are you doing to resharpen the saw? So regularly revisiting values, your well-being, your boundaries. But if you're already struggling with these things on your own, it might also mean that you just now need formal accountability. You need more than just yourself to be able to do the process of identity shift. Okay. So very important as we're going through, maybe let me pause for a bit. I'm just speaking. Let me pause for a bit. What's resonating with you from what I've just said so far? What's resonating with you from what I've said so far? Okay, let me just pause. Okay, what is resonating with you so far? Okay. Please use the chat box. Let me just pause here. What's resonating? Okay. Just gonna read it a little bit. Let's see here. Learning to trust self and others, reflecting on personal boundaries, the threshold. I cannot expect better without being better. Yeah. The revisiting of my own values, well-being, and boundaries. Petro. The revisiting of own values. Okay. Yeah. Okay. What's resonating? Learning to delegate. Candace. Yeah. Okay. Learning to delegate. Okay. That I'm allowed to change to become better. Yeah. Revisiting my own values. How the junior members don't take accountability and push back, ask for everything, tiny thing. Okay. Yeah. So obviously it's almost like you're in a vortex, right? People will just operate based on the lead that you provide. Okay. Learning to delegate. Okay. Taking ownership, not forgetting about your values, trust, to identify that I need growth. Okay. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. All right. So again, moving on. So how do we reflect on our leadership growth? So we need to identify areas of leadership to develop and so that we can strengthen our ability to lead the team to success, right? So you want to be able to identify what is the one area of leadership identity that needs evolving for you and your team to thrive. Yeah. What is the one leadership identity that needs to evolve for you and your team to thrive? Again, you can use the chat box. Okay. And looking at the 6 steps that I shared, which one of these 6 steps would you start applying this week? Okay. So just a quick kind of reflection, which leadership identity needs to evolve. Okay. Biggest frustration because of the overload. There's not even time to think about areas of growth because of constantly running. Yes. If you're gonna trapped in constantly running, operational, trapped, and that is it. So that is an indication of an identity threshold. You are trapped. So it almost feels counterintuitive to say, for you to get untrapped, for you to release yourself from this place that you are in Zandi, you need to create time to do those things. Otherwise, nothing is changing. I know it's counterintuitive. It feels like I don't already have time, but you're asking me for my time? Yes, you're gonna need to invest time and energy to almost unhook yourself, to take yourself from this space. Otherwise, you keep on going that way. The result is the burnout we spoke about, right? The result is the mental emotional breakdown, because if you keep on going at that pace, over functioning, right? Okay, and desensitized. So the challenge is that when you're over functioning, you also become desensitized. You're not seeing your impact on the team, and you see it late. I remember I was working with a particular executive, female lead lady. She had 3 consecutive times of what is it called? The surveys, the pulse surveys. 3 consecutive times she got pulse surveys that were negative, but she kept on thinking that she needed to work harder. She needed to put in more effort, but that it didn't change. She didn't need to put in more effort. She didn't need to work harder. She needed to stop. She needed to stop and start recalibrating and come back and do the work from a different version of leadership. From a different version of leadership. Okay, all right. Yeah, supervisor management being stuck in old ways, resisting change, lack of communication and team collaborating. Yeah, Nancy, these are real things, right? These are real things. And we all know change is challenging. We all know, starting with yourself, when you look at what have you done to change yourself this year? It's easy to get stuck in the old patterns. It's easy to get stuck in the identity threshold that we spoke about, right? It is very easy to do that. So how do we help these people? A conversation alone like this does not change an identity threshold. Thank you for joining the session. And it is building awareness, yes, but it does not lead to the transformation, right? So it leads to awareness, but it does not lead to the transformation. So how do you get to the next level of your own leadership, identity? So you need to experience transformative shifts, and you need to go through a process that allows for the transformation. You need a process. As you can see, where we are is not an event. We just didn't wake up today and the team is lacking communication. It's been a series of events that has led the team to this place. So we cannot just have one conversation and expect that the team is going to shift. That's probably not going to happen, right? And then in the transformation process, you're not just shifting the outer behaviors, you have to shift the internal, the total person. When the person experiences wholeness internally, when they are experiencing change that benefits them, that can spill over into how they lead. That can spill over into how they lead. So very important there. So let me share with you our Leadership for Women transformative process, why it guarantees the behavior change that we're talking about, right? Why does it guarantee? So when we go through the leadership transformation process, right, which is a 12-week journey, yeah, what we do, we start up with an upfront agreement. So we do what we call a discovery session, where we identify opportunities for growth and we start to develop positive goals from the very start, so that we can start implementing daily, weekly, behaviors that we start experimenting with in the workplace. And then we use what we call multisensory input. We have motivational content that forms part of our 12-week journey that person listens to every day 6 times. Why 6 times? Ideas are accepted after the 6th time is presented. If you listen to yourself, right, what is the narrative you're currently telling about the people who are stuck in their old ways? So you currently have a conversation, you currently have a narrative, but you ask yourself, is this narrative helping me to move the team forward, right? Is this narrative helping me to move myself forward, right? So what we do with our multisensory input, which is the motivational content that we use, because we take information through our 5 senses, is the seeing, is the hearing, right? So what we do is, when we increase the uptake of motivational content, we do what we call a positive displacement. So we're giving you new input to formulate new narratives that would then formulate new behaviors for yourself, right? Because a lot of the times the limiting thing, the story you're telling, is it getting you anywhere? So we give you input to tell a different story that energizes you and gets you to change your emotions, but also gets you to change your behaviors, right? And we use a concept of a psychology of behavior change called spaced repetition. Ideas are accepted after the sixth time they present it, right? So this once off is not going to change our behaviors. And that's why we send people to training. They come back and you ask yourself, they went to training, but they're still the same. Nothing has changed. Why? Because the habits they have, the narratives they have, the emotions they have, their current self-concept cannot be changed by one input. Right? One conversation, 2 days of training cannot change your self-concept. And then we meet for what we call a reinforcement session. Weekly, we meet to have a coaching session that allows us to reinforce the concept, to have the conversation, to identify the narratives that are not working, and to almost like really, work with the new narratives that we're getting from our motivational content. Then positive affirmations, okay? So we start to change our language. As I mentioned earlier on positive displacement, ego, right? If you look at it, it's what you put in is what comes out. So if you are just getting information from your environment, I normally talk about the social, what is it called? The social streets, right? So someone will say, I don't have time. You also join and say, I don't have time, right? So when you start to think about that, about time, you're constantly overwhelmed, right? We have our module on time where we say, time is our friend. Time is my friend. If I wake up, I've got time. Right? So we start to have positive affirmations, which then affect, obviously, your emotions, which then also affect your habits, and then go directed action. We talk about the fact that proximity creates contact. Many people say they know about goals, but when you actually ask them to share their goals, senior people, executives alike that we take through the process, when you ask them to share their goals, right? They are not goals, they are desires, right? And even though we've heard so much about goals, most people still don't, they don't practice goal-directed behavior, goal-directed actions, right? So ask yourself this week, all the things you've done, which goal were you trying to satisfy? But we also talk about one personal goal, one business goal every week. So we're not just focusing on business goals, we're focusing on the total leader, total person. One business, one person. Measured performance, we're able to measure at the beginning, where are you? We're able to measure at the end, where you are. Okay. And then we, as mentioned, we take a total person approach. We are not just talking total person, total leader approach. We're not just approaching your individual. We're also not just approaching your business. We are saying you are the instrument of business leadership. So we work on you so you can work on the business, right? We work on you so that you can work on the business, right? So what does this transformative process, entail, right? So it's a structured program offered to women leaders, and the investment for this process is about 33,000 rands to 50,000 rands. Obviously, if you want to join us, we have got a cohort that starts in the beginning of Jan, 22 Jan. If you want to join us, you'll be able to obviously lock the 2025 rate, which is currently 33,000 rands. And you might be saying, oh, that is costly. And I know that I'm speaking to women and money. We also are very sensitive to prices. I remember when I did the Leadership for Women myself in 2017, and it was 28,000 at the time. I was like, no, this is too much. But being a learning addict as I am, I invested in the process, right? And I was just reflecting recently to say, what has been the return on investment from 2018, right? When I joined the program, I was on the fence. I wasn't sure that I could afford a doctorate, right? But I was able to enroll in 2018, start my doctorate, $100,000 doctorate, pay it for myself while I'm working, right? So I would have stayed on the fence thinking I can't afford it. But the level of growth that I experienced made me become the person who can generate that income, right? I had grown in my leadership abilities, in my belief for myself. I had grown. So I was able to pay in rocket time without borrowing the $100,000 doctorate from William James College. And I look at it from when I graduated in 2021, what are the things that I've been able to do as a result of just continuing to be accountable to a process, right? So initially I had formal accountability to go through the process, but once you have the process, you have the process. And I've continued to reap the investment, the benefits from the investment I made then, right? And then when we talk to leaders and we ask them, what are your high payoff activities? Where are you spending your time? We often unearth that you are losing about 100,000 rands a month, right? 100,000 from the fact that you're exhausted, you're not getting to strategic things, you're picking up the bait for your team that is currently not performing. So if you look at it, if your team is not actually performing to the possible potential that they have, how much are you losing as a result, right? Okay, so that is also an important thing where people say, oh, this is pricey. But also because we're speaking to female leaders who are sensitive about pricing, but look at the numbers in terms of how much loss are you experiencing as a result of you not operating at the potential level that you're capable of operating at, if that makes sense. Okay, so who is this program for? The transformative process? It is for women who are seeking deep alignment, clarity, and major personal and professional growth. Okay. It is not for people who are looking for quick fixes. We don't do quick fixes. It's a 12-week journey. It's an identity shift journey. It's not a knowledge and information session, right? We do the deep work, the transformation work, so that a person can sustain their own leadership, but also is able to shift their own leadership. So what are the benefits of joining our cohort? If you become one of us or join our cohort, it doesn't have to be a lonely journey. This leadership transformation journey, you don't have to do it alone. A lot of us are like, let me work harder. I can't expose myself. People will know that maybe I'm not a good leader. No, everybody reaches an identity threshold regularly. It's an indication that you're growing, right? But you sometimes need to get to a community to see what are the other people's experiences, right? And what this does is build, and fosters teamwork so that you're not just isolated thinking about your role, thinking about how you're experiencing your organization. So we do this in a cohort. Our cohorts only has 8 women. Okay, we limit the numbers so that we don't compromise the deep work that is needed or the deep work that we need to do. Okay, and then identity alignment. Obviously, yes, you saw the identity strain that is happening from the 5 pain points. So our process really is to allow that identity alignment. You need to increase your confidence and self-respect. Most of you are already doing the work. You're just not respecting and valuing and communicating the contribution and owning the value that you're bringing, owning the value. And again, it's because of the social conditioning that we've experienced. And then resilience and strategic influence. I remember a particular leader, a female leader, she was in a particular organization. A new CEO came in and she was a GM. And what happened is that they became oil and water, and these things happen, they're natural. They became oil and water, and then what happened? She needed to be let go of. So what then happened is there was a lot of issues raised around, maybe she's bullying, maybe this is too frustrated to resign. But because she had done the leadership for women, she continued to show up. And guess what happened in the end? She was able to negotiate her exit package, and it was a good package. But she said if this had happened to her before she did the leadership for women, she would have been frustrated, threw the toys out and left with nothing, if that makes sense. So it built that level of resilience and strategic influence, if that makes sense. So you set clear boundaries. You keep showing up where you need to show up without compromising yourself. Emotional renewal, so exhaustion cannot be a badge of honor. We need to experience that emotional satisfaction from the work that we're doing. We're already doing the work. And then sustainable performance, very important as well. Okay, how do we make sure that we maintain well-being while we're being productive? Okay, so how it works, it starts with a half-day masterclass, 10 coaching sessions, a wrap-up session. You receive a coaching pack, and you've got a community. Okay, what do you need to do? You want to join us in January. You want to start at the beginning of the year to ensure your transformation, ensure sustainability for 2026. Join us. If you enroll by December, you look up the, as I mentioned, the 2025 rate, but also we do a bonus goals workshop before we start the year so that you exactly know what am I doing, where am I going? Clarity is important. And then you define your own leadership journey, clarity on the personal leadership journey, very important. The results follow. If you do the work, results follow, right? You do the work. It's proven 500 leaders plus female leaders that have gone through this process. So if you want us to join us for the January cohort, please make sure that you join us and enjoy the transformation that I'm talking about. Okay. So some of the people that I've worked with, I remember Caroline, an executive female leader, joined us. What did she struggle with? Burnout, stress, self-doubt. which affected her performance and well-being. Going through the process, yeah, what happened? When we helped her, she regained her confidence, built effective leadership skills, got her promotion, and now she is really just flying. I can tell you a few people. You know, Jackie also joined our program. What was happening with her? She was, you know, again, exhausted, leaving work late, neglecting her elderly parents, and even her husband. Okay. But when we started, what did she notice? She started to identify the negative emotional patterns and cycles. And then she also then started to build trust in a team. So she started to realize that responsibilities can be shared, which helped her to regain her personal time and a balance. And then what happens? Started prioritizing her well-being, resumed her date nights with her husband, and embraced sustainable, aligned leadership style. It doesn't have to break us down. We can still lead without breaking down, okay? So Liz, again, I had a leader, an executive leader, was leading senior managers. Obviously, when she came, she thought the team was the problem, okay? And then but despite the fact that she had received negative feedback, you know, and the senior team was struggling a lot with effective communication. But what then happened when we did the deep work, it revealed entrenched behaviors and emotions that needed to be addressed for progress. And through this work, what was she able to do? She was able to build trust and collaboration in a team, genuine connections, broke down the silos, encouraged meaningful collaboration across the team. Okay, all right. You might be asking yourself, time commitment. So yes, it's 90 minutes per week, but guarantee you by weeks 3, 4, you start to actually have time in your diary. So people start by thinking it's not going to work. I don't have this time. But you know what happens? The deep work creates capacity. When you've got capacity, you have more time, right? So that's what we do. The deep work creates capacity. You start to experience, like most people come and they start like, I don't have time. But then they realize week 2, week 3, they start to experience that actually I have time, okay? Support and accountability guaranteed. And then obviously, as I mentioned, you want to secure our 2025 rate, you join us this year, okay? This is not just another program. This is an identity change program, not just skill. And that's why it works, right? We are not doing skill information. We're doing the transformative process. I've given you skill now. I've given you information. Yes, some people can try go and do hit and miss, right? But hit and miss normally doesn't have sustainability. So you go and try and do coaching, and then you are hit by your habits again. You default back to your settings, right? So we need sustainability, and that's what we guarantee. That is what we do. That is what we are good at. Okay. All right, guys. I'm going to open the floor for any questions, if there are any questions. But I really appreciate you staying, and I really appreciate you again. Accommodating the shift that we made. Okay. So if you have any questions, I'm going to take questions. I'm going to look out in the chat box. But thank you for coming. Thank you for joining these webinars. And we hope that we will see you in our transformative processes. We hope that some of you will join us in our transformative process that starts our cohort. We've got a cohort starting in Jan. If you want to join us later as well, you let us know. But I'm going to take questions now. Thank you. If there are any questions in the chat box, I'll take questions. Okay. Do we have any questions? Do you have start dates? So start dates, we've got 22 January, the next cohort starts. So 22 Jan, the next cohort is starting. Charmaine, yeah, Ronald. Okay. Okay, we can share dates for the whole of 2026. Yeah, we will share dates for the rest of 2026, Shinki. We'll do that. Okay, so the first one is virtual. So the first one is hybrid, right? So if you are not able to be in the half day class, half day introductory session, we do it hybrid. So we'll have face-to-face and people that are online. The rest of the sessions are online. The 10-week coaching is online. The wrap-up session, we get together again, but again, it is also hybrid. Kediboni, you can drop me an email if you want to have a conversation around installment. It's not something that we normally do, but drop me an email. We can have a look at that. There is no exams. The exams is the change in behavior, Mimi. When you have transformed, that's the biggest exam. So it's transformation work. when you have shifted your identity, you are seeing results. We measure return on investment. We measure your results we measure where you are in the beginning. We measure where you are at the end. And we are able to actually communicate the accomplishments. So you are able to communicate even to your organization what the accomplishments have been through the 12-week process. Okay, through the 12-week process. Thanks, Mimi. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's exactly 10:47. We normally try and do 45 minutes, but thank you so much for staying through, and thank you for joining the session, and have a great rest of the week, and hope to see you in our last webinar, 12th of December, and we'll send you information. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mavis. Thank you. People will be in touch. Mavis will be sending you the details of the recording if you want to watch it again or pass it on to somebody else. Thank you very much for your patience and understanding to work with us for the delay. And it was great to have you on board here this morning. So with that, I'm going to end the meeting, and we look forward to being in touch with you. Thanks for the kind words there, Delphine. That's really appreciated. See you, people. Cheers. Bye.